Hello and welcome to The Lucky Roll, an eclectic channel for eclectic games. And today I feel like I'm someone who's going to board gaming or miniatures anonymous, because today's video is going to be my pile of shame. Now, obviously I had to get the bits and pieces ready before I did the video, and I got a bit of a fright as to how much stuff I actually have. Now, a bit of... I'm not going to punish myself too harshly, because as much stuff as I'm about to show you, I have that much stuff again painted, and a lot of the games I'm about to show you I have played, but I just do intend to paint them someday if I live long enough. But nevertheless, this is Sean from the Lucky Roll's Pile of Shame video, and enjoy. So the first one we're going to look at is Dreadfleet. Now this was a game I bought on my way to a wedding. I was browsing eBay. I saw it for €20, complete, all the bits and pieces in it. Could not believe my luck, so I had to snap it up. Now, it's a beautiful game, and regular viewers of the Lucky Roll will recognize this playmat, because we've used it several times in our videos as a kind of a backdrop. The most recent one would be the Crash Octopus video. It's a beautiful game that wasn't a success for Games Workshop, which is a shame. It's the old Warhammer fantasy lore, and it's just basically battles in the high seas. From all intents and purposes, it's quite a good game. I just have never played it because it's not assembled and not painted. I did check the box, however, and everything is in it. So one of these days, it is a game I do fully intend to play. I just need to get to it. Now, in this, of course, there is... 10 warships to paint, 10 scenic bases to paint, 7 cog auxiliaries, 1 dragon auxiliary, 1 dwarf dirigible auxiliary, 7 islands, 5 shipwreck pieces, 3 sea monsters. So that's a grand total of 44 miniatures I have yet to paint in this box. The next on the pile of shame is the Aliens game from Gale Force 9, a game that is actually very, very good. It's one of my favorite franchises, and the reason this isn't painted yet is I want to do a very good job of it. I painted the Aliens vs Predator: The Hunt Begins box set by Protos Games, and I wasn't very happy with how the Marines turned out. So because of that hesitancy, I've been slow to start work on the Aliens games from Gale Force 9. Now, unfortunately, that means that there's quite a lot of minis I have to paint. So in the main box there is 23 minis. In the expansion there is 5 minis, fortunately, but some of them are quite big, including the Ripley with the power loader and the alien facehugger, and they're also crucial characters such as Bishop and Bits, standard Bishop and Ripley carrying Newt, so that's kind of technically 2 miniatures squashed into 1. We have the Ultimate Badasses expansion, which has another 6 plastic miniatures, and we have the Assets and Hazards, which is of course 34 hard plastic miniatures on its own. So that is 68 miniatures in total, to add to our previous total of 44, so the tally now stands at 112 minis to be painted. The next to add to the pile of shame is from a company called Northumbrian Tin Soldier, which are a beautiful company based in Britain. They do metal figures. Now, they gave us a press pack of the Cats of Crumptown way back, and I thoroughly recommend that you check their website out, because the stuff and quality that they do are utterly, utterly amazing. They gave us a pack of Wind in the Willows types characters that James insisted on keeping, so fortunately that is not currently added to my shame pile, but the Cats of Crumptown I insist on keeping for myself. They are absolutely beautiful metal miniatures, and one of the reasons I hadn't painted it yet is because they're of such high quality. I wanted to do them in the colors of my cats. It's like I have 3 cats, and I wanted to do them each in their colors. It's just one is a Calico, 1 and 2 are black and white, and the black and white ones, fair enough, I could do it, but I wanted to practice some more metal miniatures before I actually personalized this. But this is, as you can see, was the Kickstarter some elements of the Kickstarter and the actual press pack that was sent to me. The box itself is full of absolutely beautiful miniatures. If you're looking for a perfect gift for a geeky kind of cat fanatic, this is definitely something you should check out for yourself. A beautiful company called Northumbrian Tin Soldier, based in the UK. Now there's 12 minis to be painted in this, so this brings our grand total of unpainted minis in the pile of shame to 124. Now the next entry into the pile of shame, of course, is the Fallout board games. Now this is one of my favorite board games, but I haven't painted all the minis. Now there is a total of 5 miniatures in the core game, which you can see here. You have a Ghoul, Wasteland Wanderer, Super Mutant, Vault Dweller, and a Brotherhood of Steel. And the expansion came with 5 extra figures, which was a Enclave, a Caravan Master, new NCR Republic Soldier, a Mr. Handy, and I believe a kind of a Cowboy Outlaw Renegade thing. So that would be 10 total figures that, if were unpainted, would bring my total to 134. However, I do have 1 figure painted. So this little pile of shame is not completely shameful, as I do have 1 figure painted. So instead of my grand total being 134, my grand total is only 133. The reason I have this painted is I did a playthrough for the Lucky Roll on this series. So 133 miniatures unpainted. Now the next on the pile of shame is the first of our Warhammer items, and this is not the first and most certainly will not be the last. This is of course the latest edition of Warhammer. Now fortunately I only own the Space Marine half of this box, so what I have extra to paint would be of course the Primaris Captain, the Lieutenant, the Chaplain, the Judicar, Blade Guard Ancient, Blade Guard Sergeant, 3 of those, 3 Outriders, 3 Eradicators, and 10 Assault Intercessors. So that leaves me with a grand total of 157 minis as yet unpainted in the pile of shame. The next one on the pile of shame, and unfortunately it's quite a big one, is Star Wars Imperial Assault. Now these are actually fantastic games and I have played these. The core set I have completely painted, and the first of the expansion sets I have completely painted. So that is 44 miniatures painted out of Star Wars Imperial Assault. However, that does leave 5 expansion packs. The Bespin Gamut, the Tyrants of Lowhall, those are the small expansions. The big expansions, Return to Hoth, Jabba's Realm, and the Heart of the Empire, which to my absolute shame is still sealed in the box. So, in total there is 44 painted miniatures and 71 unpainted miniatures. So that brings the unpainted miniature total up to 228. So when I thought that was the end of the Star Wars Imperial Assault figures, I was mistaken. I forgot about the blister packs. Now that is an extra 54 figures to add to the sum total, which brings me up to 282 unpainted minis. Now, I feel I have to say that the reason I have all these is I got into Star Wars Imperial Assault at a time in my life when my back went. I couldn't walk for about 6 months. And in order to make myself feel better, I said I would buy 1 mini a week whilst I was recovering. So as you can see, it took a long time to recover and be able to walk again. So yeah, that's 54 extra minis to add to the sum total. So 282 unpainted miniatures on the pile of shame. The next game on the pile of shame is Terminator Genesis. Now, as you can see, it's not in great condition, but this technically isn't my game. This belongs to James. However, I seem to have ended up with it, and because I'm a big Terminator fan, he's not getting it back. The problem, though, is that does add a few extra figures to my tally. Now there is 31 playable miniatures in this game, and it's obviously a war game set in the Terminator universe. So adding that to the 282 figures that we already need to paint, we are now up to a grand total of 313 unpainted minis. But to be fair, it'll probably be easy to paint the Terminators because, you know, just spray them all lead belcher, and the resistant figures will probably just cover in blood. You know, it'll be a quick paint. That's why I'm keeping it, James, okay? So 313 unpainted miniatures so far. Now the next game is another game that was given to me by James on kind of extended loan, I suppose. The problem is we still haven't gotten around to playing it. It's a variation of Blood Bowl called Grind. It's a very interesting looking game actually, and one that we must actually play and give an actual review of at some stage. Very interesting kind of miniatures, as you can see. There's 5 in either team, and they have 32 different variations of arms. Now there's 2 pillars and a ball, so technically that would be an extra 13 miniatures, not including the arms. So that would bring us up to a grand total of 326 miniatures to be painted. But Grind is a game that I'd forgotten was in the pile there, and one actually I need to have another look at and give back to James, because obviously I'm keeping Terminator and that's non-negotiable, but he might, depending if it's good or not, he might get this one back. Sticking with the theme of Blood Bowl, another alternative that was given to me as a gift by one of my best friends is Dreadball Kickoff, a futuristic sports game. So as you can see, it's not a million miles away from Blood Bowl in that it has futuristic space orcs and futuristic humans. It has 16 different minis, but it's an interesting game that we should definitely have a look at one of these days. Maybe do a top 5 alternatives list to Blood Bowl. But that, of course, is an extra 16 miniatures to add to the tally, so this brings us up to a grand total of 342 unpainted minis. Now, before you ask, the reason Blood Bowl is not going to appear in this list is because my Blood Bowl sets are painted. But that now is a grand total of 342 unpainted minis. And with the mention of Blood Bowl, I thought it apt to go back to Warhammer. Now, I have a Zentian army, and the interesting thing about blue horrors and pink horrors and brimstone horrors is they keep splitting. So I have 30 pink horrors that I use in my war games. However, when you shoot a pink horror, it splits into 2 blue horrors, and if you shoot a blue horror, it splits into 2 of these tiny little yellow brimstone horrors. Now, because I bought 1 set of pink horrors, I thought I would have to buy 2 sets of blue horrors, which I did. However, only that 1 set of blue horrors has served me so far in all of my games. I've never kind of divided down that much that I needed to actually break out and paint the other set. But nevertheless, I have it here, and I suppose one day I will get round to painting it. But it is an extra 20 miniatures to add to the tally, so that brings us up to 362. Now, the next Warhammer mini that I have to paint, of course, is the Primaris Invictor Tactical Warsuit. Now, this was a kind of an impulsive buy on my part, because when Brexit was looming, I wasn't sure what was going to happen after the UK left the European Union, and whether or not the prices of Warhammer goods will go up significantly. Now, to their credit, Warhammer themselves have promised consumers in Europe that they themselves would absorb the cost or the extra tariffs on their goods, but I didn't know that at the time when I bought this. Now, I just think it's a cool looking mini. I know that people think it's kind of a dreadnought with a kind of a baby carrier at the front, but nevertheless, the fact that the thing has a side holster of a bolt pistol and a kind of a 1-arm machine gun, I just thought this would be something cool and fun to paint, but I just unfortunately haven't gotten around to it. The good news, however, with this is it only counts as 1 miniature. So the grand total in the pile of shame has only gone up by 1 to 363. Now, the next one was a Christmas gift from my friend Robert for my Zentian army. 3 Zangor Enlightened, 3 very cool little figures, but of course would require a fair amount of different painting, so I haven't gotten around to it yet. Now, he gave this to me Christmas of last year, and it's now currently October of this year. So I suppose I had better get painting this before next Christmas, lest he has a chance to give out to me. But nevertheless, it was a lovely little gift I didn't expect, and they will quite happily take charge of my Zangor army that I have built up from Warhammer, the Age of Sigmar box sets from Silver Tower and Shadows of Hammerhal, because I have Zangors in there, and these lads will do to serve them as leaders. Of course, I can't forget the tally, so there's 3 extra Citadel miniatures here, so that brings the total up to a grand total of 366. The next one, of course, is another impulse buy. I did a little unboxing of this on our video for the channel. The books are superb, and because I enjoyed the books so much, I had to, of course, treat myself to the actual minis themselves. Gaunt's Ghosts have 6 actual miniatures, all from the books, and all done in very loving detail. I had wanted to buy the old Gaunt's Ghosts miniatures before, but they were out of production and were increasing in cost. So when Games Workshop announced a new line of Gaunt's Ghosts, I was delighted. It's definitely going to be a pleasure paint one of these days, but of course it's still 6 unpainted minis, so that brings us up to a grand total of 372 unpainted miniatures. Now this next box was, of course, another Christmas gift, a very nice Christmas gift, and basically it adds to my Death Guard army and my other monsters that I would have from the Age of Sigmar, Silver Tower and Cursed City box sets. I already have Poxwalkers and Plague Walkers, but this was kind of just to flesh them out another little bit. It was a lovely gift that I wasn't expecting, but you see, the handy thing about being a nerd is that most men my age get socks and underwear for Christmas. I actually get toys because I'm a nerd, and people know that I would appreciate these things than I would more than I would, the 50th set of underwear and aftershave. But nevertheless, it was a lovely gift, and again, something I have to finish up and paint before Christmas comes. Now that's an extra 17 miniatures, so it's going to bring us up to a grand total of 389. And again, with the gifts, this was a present I got from my family for my 40th birthday. It's the start of what will probably be another army. I haven't painted any Skitari yet, but they are a very interesting faction. One of my friends actually is starting his own Skitari army, so by the time I get these painted, we'll probably share them. But yep, a very thoughtful gift. The tank here comes into 2 different shapes. You can make it into a Dune Rider and something else, I'm not sure. But there is 2 variations to this particular tank, and of course you get a Tech Priest and a whole section of Skitari Mechanicus soldiers. But that, of course, is an extra 12 miniatures, which brings the unpainted total up to 401. So the next Warhammer miniature, of course, is Rabute Gilliman. I bought him before Brexit took place, again, because I didn't want to lose out on, or pay extra for a miniature. And given that he was the head of my army, I thought it'd be a good way to kind of culminate my Ultramarines. Now, yep, it's a fantastic miniature. I am a bit intimidated in painting him because, that is a lot of gold. But he is supposedly a powerhouse on the tabletop, and I just haven't had a chance to field him yet, thanks to, that unspeakable thing that has stopped everything from happening for the last 2 years. But it's definitely a miniature I'm looking forward to painting, but I want my skills to be a bit better before I touch it, especially before I go at that sword. So, that, of course, fortunately, is only 1 mini, so it brings up our total to a grand total of 402 unpainted miniatures. The next ones, of course, are Scarab Occult Terminators. The reason I have these is as a kind of a Chaos Marine expansion onto my Zentian army. Without going into the lore, the Zench army are kind of demons, but these guys would be kind of human magicians, bad guys that would work with the demons. Now, they're Terminators, so they're extra tough, but it was a faction I bought to kind of bump up my actual Zentian army. I haven't built them yet because actually I haven't needed them. Plus the fact that I haven't been able to play a game of Warhammer 40k for the last 2 years. But nevertheless, this is an extra 5 miniatures, so that's going to bring up our total from 402 to 407. Now the next miniature is kind of, well, to be honest, it's kind of unfair. I actually had this painted, but a store local to where I live opened up with a brand new Warhammer section, and of course I went in having a nose, and it's a bookstore, but the staff, who were suddenly taking out these realms and realms of plastic toy soldiers and monsters, weren't quite sure what to do with them. So as a means of just being friendly, because you know we all should encourage gaming stores in our local areas, I had a chat with them. I spoke to the manager, and I was able to translate an awful lot of the more dense aspects of the lore and kind of give her a more workable synopsis to herself and her staff as to what these things actually were. And as a favour to them, I said that I could paint up some bits and pieces for them. So they said, okay, well look, here's a couple of bits and pieces. And one of the ones they showed me was the Stormhawk Interceptor, which I actually had painted myself. So what I did was I gave them my painted one, and in exchange they gave me an unbuilt one. So it's kind of unfair that this goes on the unpainted pile, because I had it painted, but I swapped it for an unpainted one. So regardless of my griping, it's still only going to count as one miniature, even though it's a big, huge one. So that brings the grand total up to 408. Now, taking a break from Warhammer for a little bit, this is, of course, Doom. Now, you're looking at the box and wondering, what in God's name have I been doing to my games? Have I been abusing them? And the answer is, I haven't. I got this for a knockdown price because of the damage to the box, and because I believe when it first came out, the game was, it was very expensive. I think it was up to 90 euros to 100 euros, and I got it for 40. There's absolutely nothing wrong with the components inside. It just got basically beaten up here in the corner, and because it was damaged, I got it for a knockdown price. It's a game I've played several times. It is very fun, very good, and I believe I reviewed it as well. Thoroughly enjoyed it, but because it's a game I've enjoyed so much, it's one I want to actually paint. So I don't need to paint it to play the game, but it is something I do want to paint at some stage. So I am going to add it to my to be done pile, or my pile of shame as it is now. So there's an extra 37 miniatures in this. So that's unfortunately quite a bit more. So it's going to be 408 plus 37, which is now 445 unpainted miniatures in the collection. Now, like I said, it's not one that's top of the list to be painted, and it's certainly not preventing me from playing the game, but it's a game I've enjoyed enough that I actually want to paint them. The next game is Joan of Arc. Now, this was a Kickstarter game. I've only played it a couple of times. It's quite good. It goes into great depth. Myself and Tony have played it a few times, and we keep promising ourselves we'll play it more. This was basically, when it came out on Kickstarter, was quite famous because the insane, and I mean insane, amount of miniatures that came with it. Now, of course, Kickstarter being Kickstarter, we also got the stretch goals, which came with the reliquary box and another crazy amount of miniatures. Now, I mean, some of these miniatures are absolutely beautiful, but the figures themselves are actually tiny. The scale of the minis is insanely small. So the monsters, whilst they are actually nice and big, are actually even bigger, again, in terms of the actual game. Nevertheless, we're not here to talk about Joan of Arc, we're here to count the minis, and the amount of unpainted minis in this two particular boxes are 389. So, 389 along with 445 leads to a grand total of 834 unpainted minis. Thanks, John. Now, this next game is, of course, Firefly Adventures, which is Brigands and Browncoats. Now, fortunately, they all come assembled, and it's a game I've played a few times. I quite enjoy it. And it was a game I bought on my honeymoon, would you believe it? I saw it for €50 and I snagged it there and then. Now it's from Gale Force 9, one of my favourite publishers, and it's Firefly, so it's one of my favourite kind of franchises. There's 20 figures in it. Now, because it's Firefly, I am going to paint it because it's just one of these things I am determined to do. Like I said, you don't need to paint the figures to enjoy the game, and I have played it and I have enjoyed it. But it's still an extra 20 figures I need to add to the actual unpainted tally. So that is now a grand total of 854 Firefly figures that I need to paint. But of course I am going to look forward to painting the lovely Kaylee. So, yes, 854. So unfortunately we weren't able to stay away from Warhammer for long, but this is another game that I have yet to play properly because I love to play painted games when I can, especially when it comes to Warhammer Quest games. Now, I can be forgiven a little bit for this one because there's 60 miniatures, but I have 38 of them painted. I have all the main figures painted, the heroes, the bad guys, the monsters, the bosses. The only things I don't have painted are the small little bitty things like the corpse rats, the bat swarms, 4 mysterious kind of objects, 2 gravestones, 2 gargoyles, and 2 gnawbone strays. So another 2 nights of painting and I will have this completely painted. And it is, of course, because it's the latest of the Warhammer Quest games, it's one I am itching to try, and if I can I will try and do a solo play series for the actual game for the channel. Now, because it's only 22 rather than 60 minis, it's not quite as devastating to the tally as one would have initially feared, but we're still up to a grand total of 876 unpainted minis on the pile of shame. Now this next one, of course, is, well, it's going to take a long time before I get round to this, but when the Horus Heresy Burning of Prospero initially came out, I couldn't afford it and I wanted it so badly. But one of my hobbies is to kind of keep an eye on eBay for unusual things, and I saw this as good as new on eBay in Ireland for what was 20% below the original original retail price, and I thought, what an absolute bargain. Now the people who sold it to me told me that it was opened and looked at but never actually used, and I've had a look through the bits and pieces myself, and true to their word, everything was in perfect condition. It's just something that made me very happy because I had given up on ever owning this game or finding it because it was just at a time in my life where I wasn't exactly didn't have money to spare for bits and pieces like this. But to be able to capture something that I'd kind of looked in the window at for so long was, you know, a delightful little thing. It was a lovely little bonus because it's quite hard to get this game now. And the couple who sold it to me were so nice and so fun to talk to, they actually threw in a free 40k book for me as well, just as a thank you. So I don't know if you're watching or not, but if you are, thank you very much, lads. You certainly made my week with this one. Nevertheless, though, it is a lot of extra minis to paint, and I had forgotten to actually count the minis before I looked at this. 47 extra minis for this game. 47 extra minis, and they include some of the custodians, they include some of the Sisters of Silence, they include Space Wolves, and they include, of course, the Thousand Sons, Magnus, the Who Did Nothing Wrong's Legion. So, sorry, I had to do a little bit of maths there. It was a former total of 876 minis with 47 extra ones, which are going to be fun to paint, but I don't know, every time I take this box out, I'm too busy looking at it to actually paint it. But that brings up the unpainted mini total to 923. Now, the next game doesn't really need much of an introduction. It's a very beat-up box, but it was the condition in which I bought it in. What counts is the components inside, which are all in top-tier condition. Hero Quest is, of course, an amazing game. And, of course, there's a new version of it, reimagination of it, I suppose, by Hasbro, which hopefully will be hitting retail later on, either this year or next year. It's a game that if you have small kids, you gotta play it with them because it's just fun. It's kind of the granddaddy of a lot of these adventure games, and it's a game everyone should play, you know. It was something that kind of captured the imagination of an awful lot of kids in their childhoods. Now, it's obviously been well played and well loved, and obviously, as you can tell, well used from the sellotape and the rubber band, but the minis inside are all in perfect condition, as are the furniture and the board and the cards themselves. New seal games are nearly impossible to get, but the minis are ones that deserve a paint job. They're minis of their time. They're not, obviously, they don't compare to the new Age of Sigmar kind of miniatures that come out today in terms of what they have, of terms of detail and say poses and whatnot. But there is a beautiful charm to these, and it's always been one of my kind of pleasure paints for the future to actually paint all of these minis. Now there's 35 minis in HeroQuest, and so to add 35 to our total of 923, that brings us up to 958 miniatures unpainted so far in the pile of shame. But HeroQuest, like I said, I just have to really single it out. This is a game that is precious to me, and when I do get around to painting these miniatures, it'll be a nice time. Now the next game is Bloodborne, the board game. A game I quite enjoyed actually, and a game I did an initial run through for the channel. It's not the most concise and clear rulebook in the world, as it does lead to confusion, but nevertheless it is a very, very fun board game, but also quite a hard one. Now this is a strange one. I don't know if I'd ever paint it or not, because the aesthetic leads to kind of dirty grey miniatures, if you know what I mean. I have another game called This War of Mine, which I'm not going to include in this pile, because the computer game was all kind of grey. So the characters, the minis being in grey, suits the atmosphere and the vibe of the game. It would actually take from it if I painted them. This, I'm not sure. I mean, the computer game itself obviously was in a kind of a touch of colour, but if I do paint these, it would be in a very kind of dark tone. Now, whether I get round to it or not is another thing. This is not going to be one of my high priority paints, because the game is perfectly playable and very playable without it, because the grey doesn't take from the atmosphere of the game. But nevertheless, it is an extra 37 miniatures to add to the total. So that brings us to 995 unpainted minis on the pile of shame. The next game, of course, is Dark Souls, the board game. Now, this is a weird one for two reasons. The firstly is, I don't know if it's a game that needs its minis painted, because like This War of Mine and Dark Souls, or Bloodborne, I don't think the atmosphere is really affected by having kind of grey, scary minis. It's a very grim, dark kind of game, and having grey miniatures on the board doesn't really do it any harm. Now, strictly speaking, this isn't my game. This belongs to a man called Daniel, who painted 5 of the figures, and he just left it at my house. Now, I've tried several times to give it back to him, but he's basically, his own house is so full of clutter that Dark Souls is currently living with me. So, technically, Daniel, if you're watching this, as far as I'm concerned, this still belongs to you, but I'll add it to my unpainted pile of minis shame. Just because it's here, and like I said, when you want it, it's back, it's yours, but right now I'm just going to add it to my own current total. So it's an extra 27 miniatures. However, 5 of them are painted by Daniel himself, and he's done a great job with them. So that only brings the tally up to 1,017 unpainted minis in the pile of shame. This next game, however, Space Crusade, there's absolutely no doubt who this game belongs to, and this game belongs to me. It was a game I was delighted to pick up on eBay, and I was lucky as well in that all the components were in there. I think there's 1 or 2 kind of mitigating tokens, like Lieutenant Colonel or something, that are missing, but you can easily work the game around. But for what I paid for it, to get the game in such a good condition, with 99.9% of the components intact, was, well, quite frankly, a godsend. It's a game I've played a couple of times. I really enjoy it. Now, it's like HeroQuest in that it's a granddaddy of a lot of the more modern games, but nevertheless, it's a cool one to have in the collection, and one I kind of dreamt of when I was a kid. How do I put it? The miniatures are going to be fun to paint because they're quite old cast. They're not the best looking minis in the world, but nevertheless, it's going to be fun painting them up to try and make this game shine as much and make it be all it can be. But Space Crusade, of course, has an extra 50 minis to add to the total, so that brings our unpainted minis up to 1,067 for the pile of shame. Now, the next game is Necromunda Dark Uprising. This is a game I really want to try because I watched a playthrough by Guerrilla Miniature Games of the Cannibal Cult thing, and I actually found it hilarious. The problem is that this thing is a monster. Now, I haven't opened it yet because, well, quite frankly, I have a lot to do and a lot to paint, and it's quite a lot in it. There is, I believe, 26 miniatures from the two gangs, but there's also 17 sprues worth of terrain, so it's going to be a hard one to count. If I was to add just the 26 miniatures, the miniature count would be 1,093. However, the frames kind of work up to, and I've worked it out here, something like 24 walls, 12 long walls, and 24 pillars, which rounds off at kind of 60. So even though this is a box that's predominantly terrain with only 26 actual minis, I'm going to just round it up to 1,153 because I'm going to count the minis as 26 and the terrain as 60. So this brings the pile of shame up to a grand total of 1,153 miniatures. Now, it's a game, like I said, I do want to try, but it's definitely going to be one I'll have to invest in an airbrush before I attack it. My life up to this point has been kind of painting with the hairy stick. I've never really airbrushed before, but I think I will learn how to do so before I attack this monster. Now, this next one, of course, was the first of the reimagined Necromunda games. Now, the reason this is still sealed is I picked it up. It was an act of absolute fortune. I picked it up from a shop that was just getting rid of old stock, and this was, I'd say, I don't know, one of the few sealed Necromunda Underhive games in the world that they just hadn't gotten rid of. Now, they sold it to me for half the asking price, so I got an absolute bargain on this. So it's, what can I say, you know, I was very, very lucky to kind of get this. There's an extra 20 miniatures in this. I'm not going to count the terrain on this one because it's just walls and little bits and pieces. It's not like the pillars in the larger one. But this is a sealed copy of the original one. No, sealed is not quite sealed, but the plastic seal is still on it, so at least I know that the components are all good inside. But it was a bargain that I just could not leave, and as a result, I now have an extra 20 minis to add to the total, so it is now 1,173 unpainted minis in the pile of shame. This next one is, of course, a sealed copy of 7th edition Dark Vengeance. Now again, when I say sealed, it's obviously seal in distress. But nevertheless, it's completely intact, and it was the same shop that I got Necromunda Underhive for, and I got it for a fraction of the cost again. Basically, I could not believe my luck, and despite having an insane amount of miniatures, I couldn't just pass these two sealed copies of kind of out-of-print games away. So there's a lot of minis in this one, of course. There's 49 Citadel miniatures, which will cover the Dark Angels, and a lot of Chaos and kind of tree bikes. Now, these are, of course, Space Marines before the Primaris reimagination or invention came out. But nevertheless, this was a starter set that brought a lot of people into the hobby, including one of my best friends. So it was a nice thing to pick up, a nice thing to have. Now, I don't know, maybe someday I'll open it and I'll paint them, or maybe I'll sell it on to an actual Dark Angels fan that just needs this to complete their collection. I'm not sure, but at the moment we'll count it as part of the unpainted minis pile of shame. So that's an extra 49 minis, which brings our grand total up to 1,222 unpainted minis. Now, this next collection is an interesting one. Warhammer Underworld's Shadespire. I got for a bargain. A friend of a friend wanted to get rid of his collection, and he sold me the Shadespire box plus 2 of the expansions for, I believe, €45. It was too good a bargain to actually pass up. Now, I definitely got a bargain with it because the guy painted the Shadespire miniatures himself and did an absolutely beautiful job of it. So there will be basically 8 fighters in this, but they've all been painted. So fortunately, it doesn't actually add to the tally. But the 2 expansion kits, however, he did not have time to paint. So there is 8 miniatures there, so that would bring the tally up to 1,230. And of course, the extra game after, which was Nightvault, which is another interesting story. I can't go into details, but at my local friendly gaming store, there was basically I put an order and there was mistakes were made, but because I'm a good customer and because the people there are very, very nice, and I didn't even ask for this, but by way of an apology, they gave me these 2 items for free. They just threw them in. So how do I put it? It was embarrassing, but it was also, you know, it's nice how nice people can be, you know, and you forget how much your custom is valued, and you know, you also forget that how important it is to be good to your local friendly gaming store, because you know it's all about the community. And I have to say, this was, like I said, it was a lovely surprise. I haven't painted it yet because I just haven't gotten around to it, but of course there's a lot of extra minis in this one as well. So I believe this, including the little expansion, there's 5 lads in this, and I believe there is 10 lads in this. That adds another 15 minis to the total, including the previous 8. So we're now at a grand total of unpainted miniatures of 1,245 unpainted minis. Now the next thing is not so much minis, but it is an unpainted asset for the games. It's basically the gang stronghold for Necromunda. I had great kind of hopes of doing kind of imaginative narrative playthroughs, and the idea of having a gang stronghold for one of my friends to kind of assault was, well, just, you know, too much of a temptation. Now again, it's terrain, so it's kind of hard to kind of quantify in terms of minis, but it has 1 watchtower, 1 gunk tank, 1 set of stronghold gates, 4 by stronghold walls, 2 by stronghold corners, and 1 stronghold wall extension. So that kind of combines up to a number of 10. So what we'll do is we'll just add 10 to the tally. So it is now a current unpainted miniatures of 1,255. Taking a break from Warhammer, this of course is followed Wasteland Warfare, and this is actually a real entry into the pile of shame, because it's a game my wife bought me, and of course followed as a franchise I loved, but I just haven't been able to get my head around the rules in this game as of yet. By the time I have the first part of it down and I move on to the second one, by the time I get to the end of the second one, I've forgotten the first part of it. It's a game, I don't know why it's just not going into my head. It's a little complicated. Of course, it has 6 different die here, and it goes into kind of great detail on terms of weapon distance, hit ratio, armor values, things like that. But it just, how do I put it? It's a game that is very well regarded, and it's a game that I don't think I've ever heard of anyone not enjoying it. But it just won't go into my head, and it's a shame. I'll need to actually get my friend Tony to help me with this, because he's a pure rules guru, and right now it just refuses to cooperate with my poor tired brain. However, it is a game that I do want to play, and it is one that's basically is a real shameful entry into my pile of shame, given how big a fan of Fallout I am, that I haven't painted it or played it. Nevertheless, it's an extra 12 miniatures to add to the total. So if I take in the extra 10 from the gang warfare, that brings us up to a total of 1,277 unpainted minis. This next game, of course, is Warcry. Now, this was a bit of a frivolous purchase, because as part of my work, I was given a kind of a voucher for a store that had to be spent. and it was coming up towards the, like, this is from Christmas 10 months ago, and the voucher was kind of running out, so I had to spend it on something. And unfortunately, I wasn't sure what to get. Now, I had a look at Warhammer Warcry, the Age of Sigmar game, and it's basically the 40k version of, the Age of Sigmar version of Necromunda. Now, it's a game that is highly regarded. Atom Miniatures talks at length about it. This one had two-sided boards, so I thought, okay, if the voucher is going to go off, I might as well get something with it, so I got this. One of the reasons I was a little annoyed about it is Kill Team came out, I think, about a month afterwards, so it's not something I probably would have picked up given that I already had Necromunda, but I had a voucher that needed to be used, and so I thought, better get something than nothing. Now, that said, I did do a bit of research before I frivolously threw it away. I thought this is a game that's self-contained, everyone seems to like it a lot, the miniatures are great, but after looking at Necromunda and the other, 1,000 odd miniatures that I haven't painted yet, this is making me feel more sad than happy. Nevertheless, at least I have it, and it's still sealed, but it does add an extra tally to it. Now, there is, I believe, 17 extra miniatures that adds to the tally, but there's also terrain as well. Now, a lot of the terrain on this is kind of doors and kind of gangways and walls and things like that. So what I'll do is I'll round it up to a kind of 10 miniatures, because there's about 8 doors and there's bits of wall and thing like that. So to add it up, if we were just to add the miniatures, it would be a grand total of 1,294 minis, but adding the extra 10 round figure, it brings us up to 1,304 unpainted miniatures. And Warcry, of course, adds to that tally. Now, please God, this time next year, if I do another pile of shame video, this won't be on it, and it'll be one of my favorite games, like what's his name, Uncle Atom, who does his own miniature videos, loves this game. So hopefully I will get the chance to play it and will love it just as much. But nevertheless, the tally now stands at 1,304 unpainted minis. And this, of course, is the game I wanted, or I would have bought with the voucher had I known it was coming out a month later. Kill Team Octarius is a game I'm really looking forward to, and it's next on my paint list. The reason it's open is because I have everything primed. As soon as I finish painting the last 18 pieces of Curses, or 22 pieces of Curse City, I fully intend to attack this with vigor to get games up and running as soon as possible. Now, it's a beautiful set, and of course everyone is talking about it, but it's a game I'm really looking forward to trying. But yeah, I've got to get it painted first, so hopefully I will attack that over the next few weeks and get it done. What it does do, however, is it adds 23 miniatures to the tally, so it would bring the tally up to 1,327. Now, there's also terrain in it, but it's not kind of one big, huge, chunky piece terrain, so if we're going to follow the rule of thumb that we have with the other terrain pieces, and say the larger terrain pieces like the Stormtalon gunship, it rounded up to a figure of 15. So 23 plus 15 for, say, the terrain will bring us up to a total of 1,342 unpainted minis. The next selection of minis were, well, I was reading a book called Warriors of Ultramar, in which the Ultramarines were basically defending their world from Tyranids, kind of horrible alien monsters. But one of the reasons I liked about that book was it wasn't just the Space Marines defending their world. There was a whole load of kind of normal humans, basically the Ultramarine auxiliaries, just ordinary humans, came to defend their world as well. And the book mentioned a lot of them. Now, I always found it kind of cool, and I always promised myself that I would do an auxiliary force of Ultramarines at some stage of my life. And one I came across here is I found a store, I won't say where, but whatever way it worked out, they had an overstock of stuff and they were selling all of these at half price. So I thought if I was ever going to kind of get Ultramarines auxiliaries, this was the only time I could do it. Now, generally there's roughly around 31 in a platoon. There was 10 minis in the box, so I got 3 boxes of Cadian Infantry Guard that I'm going to customize into basically Ultramarine auxiliaries. So I'm probably going to paint them blue and figure out some other thing to do with it. I have 1 Sentinel that was there as well. That was also half price, so I mean, just a bit of kind of backup for the lads. And at the same time, I also got these Orcs and Gretchen, all of course half price. So I believe, I spent about 50 euros in total for all of these cool things, which was just quite frankly a steal. I don't want to list the shop here in case someone from Games Workshop is watching and I get them in trouble. But it was just a good bargain, and I couldn't pass it up. But nevertheless, it does add to my actual tally. So unfortunately, I have an extra 30 miniatures here, which are the Cadian Guard that I'm going to make Ultramarine auxiliaries. I have 1 Sentinel, which fortunately is only 1 mini, and I have 22 Orcs. So that brings me up to a grand total of 1,395 unpainted minis. The next one, of course, are the old classic Space Marine Terminator squads. Now, this was something I got 100 years ago and forgot about. It still has the dust on it, and yeah, it's something I have to paint and add to my force. But as you can see, it is definitely an old kit, because the well, we're spoilt with the choice of models these days in terms of the detail they come up with. These boys are a bit clunky, but nevertheless, you know, it's a nice thing to have, and something I will paint up because it'll be interesting to see on the tabletop. And who knows, you know, by the time I've finished painting all the rest of these miniatures, by the time I get around to these, I could be a master painter. Nevertheless, it's an extra 5 minis, so it brings us up to a grand total of 1,400 unpainted minis. These next 2 items, of course, are like the Storm Talon gunship I was talking about earlier. I painted these for my local friendly game store that had opened up with a Warhammer selection, gave me stuff to paint, and what I did was I swapped them out with models I had already painted. So I already had a Razorback painted, and I already had a Drop Pod painted. So basically what I did was I gave them my painted models, and they gave me the unpainted boxes, and it was a fair straight swap. Nevertheless, it's, like I said, slightly frustrating because technically these were painted, but now they're back in the unpainted pile. But nevertheless, they do only count as 1 miniature each. So to quote Gimli from Lord of the Rings, you know, it doesn't matter how big it is, it still only counts as 1. So that brings us up to a grand total of 1,402 unpainted miniatures. Now this one is a tad unfair. James, the director of the Lucky Roll, got this as a, well, kind of a half-cheeky Christmas present from myself. He was a big fan of Warhammer Fantasy, and I think is still hurt at its discontinuation. If you want to upset him, you just really mention the name Warhammer Age of Sigmar, and you'll see what is quite possibly the most patient man in the world turn a few different colours at the audacity of it all. Nevertheless, he got this for Christmas, and how do I put it? I got it given back to me. Nevertheless, it's still, it counts on the pile of shame. So it's an extra 15 miniatures for this starter set. So it brings our total up to a grand total of 1,417 unpainted minis. But these 15 minis belong to James. And James, like it or not, is someone who has and owns Warhammer Age of Sigmar stuff, no matter what he says. Now this little next pile, and as you can see, thankfully we're getting towards the end of the pile of shame, was a load of beautiful metal miniatures given to me by a good friend of mine called Rob. He was clearing out his home and he had a collection of miniatures from when he was a kid. And some of these are really nice. Now, they're all in plastic boxes. Some are painted, some are not. But they're the more kind of, at this stage, oddities, rather than miniatures that I'm going to add to games anytime soon. But nevertheless, they are pretty cool. Like, you have the old classic Space Marine here. You have a missionary, but he's basically he's metal. Now this fella's painted, so technically he doesn't count on the unpainted pile. But you also have kind of cool little orcs here, like this guy who has a beard. He's literally a grot herder, and I have never seen these orcs before. He's completely metal. We have another guy here from the Bad Moons. Now the arms are in the pile over here, but this guy basically is kind of half covered in power armor. He's kind of almost like a tech marine. And you have, of course, he's customized some of his own orcs with plastic armors from more modern armies. And we have grots, which are kind of based, but never painted. He also gave me some interesting little boxes, like Citadel Miniatures new releases. Now, this is quite old. There's 2 minis in here. They're 2 orc knobs, and these ones, of course, have been made in the USA in 1993. So it was a cool little thing to see, and it's kind of a legacy of the hobby. Now, I don't know if I'll ever open this to paint it or not, but it is a lovely thing to have, and it was a lovely gift to give me. But of course, all these minis, of course, add to the tally, especially this little one with the snotlings. There's about 10 of the little shaggers in there, and there's it's a small little box. So unfortunately, whilst it's a cool thing to have and a great little thing to kind of add to the tally, it has really added to the tally, especially because those are not the only snotlings in here. There's another dozen of them here, at least in this box. So all included, it has brought the entire tally up to 1,481 unpainted miniatures. So what I can say to Rob is, thank you, Rob, and thanks, Rob. Now this is the second last thing I have to show on the list. It was just a free mini that came from the Warhammer store. If you call into the Warhammer store, they just give you a free little mini, so just as a thank you for coming in. And what it is it's a Grey Knight. Now he's in bits, and well, I counted all the bits and put them in there, but I haven't painted him yet because, well, I have a bit to do before him. But as the second last thing, I thought it would be fun to show this one before I show the final massive project that I have to end the video with. So this brings the total up to 1,482. And the last entry into the pile of shame is quite a big one. It is 80 issues of Mortal Realms, the Age of Sigmar magazine by Hachette Parkworks. I have 80 issues. I haven't painted any. To be fair, I had ambitions of doing a video on it, but I was too busy completing Warhammer Conquest, the 80 issues of that, and please do feel free to check that video out for all the miniatures there painted, but I might have been a trifle over-ambitious in thinking I could get this one done as well. Now, yeah, in this particular collection there is 2 armies, the Stormcast Eternals and the Nighthaunts, and there's also a lot of terrain. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to round the terrain into the, one big piece. Still only counts as one. So it's brought the total up for my pile of shame to 1,676 unpainted minis. So yeah, that's a lot of unpainted minis. Please God, my wife will never ever see this video. If she does see it, I suppose I have 3 options. The first option is prayer, that there'll be divine intervention somehow. The second option, I suppose, is bribery. I'll buy a lot of chocolate. Or I suppose the third option would be guilt, in which I'll point out her equally impressive collection of shoes. I'll probably stick with bribery though. But anyway, if you enjoyed this video, please hit the like and subscribe button. And who knows, if this video does well, I might do a Point of Pride video, because to be fair, I don't just collect the things, I do paint them, and roughly the amount of stuff you see here that's unpainted, I have the same actually painted. So please God, if this video is popular enough, I might kind of do instead of a pile of shame, I might do a pile of pride one of these days. Regardless, this is Sean from The Lucky Roll, and if you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, all that good YouTube stuff. And until next time, good luck, God bless, and I hope you, unlike me, doesn't have 1,676 unpainted minis to do.